He wakes up with a void inside, not pain, not fear, just absence. As if something vanished overnight, something silent, but always present. And now there is a fracture inside his chest. It doesn't he bleed. It doesn't he scream, but it doesn't he let him breathe either. This is not the beginning of illness, this is the beginning of awakening. We imagine life should feel clear, linear, stable. We dream of stillness, safety, a rhythm that never breaks. We want days to flow like calm rivers, smooth, predictable. We long for peace as if peace meant sameness, but that is not how life works. The kind of peace we chase is made of glass. It looks clean, ordered, transparent, but try to breathe inside it, and you suffocate. Because outside the glass, life moves, and inside, only shadows. Life cannot survive stillness for too long, it demands motion. And motion always begins with pain. Pain is not a malfunction, it is a signal. It is the body's whisper, the soul's thunder. Look, not outward, not at others, at yourself. Pain often wears the mask of external events, a betrayal, a loss, a sharp collapse. But truthfully, it always starts deeper. It begins at the exact moment the world no longer matches the story you told yourself. The moment reality refuses to play along with your illusions. You thought they loved you, you thought the job made you valuable, you thought time would wait, you thought you understood yourself, and then, something cracks, a silence opens inside, something no longer fits. You try to go on as if nothing happened, you smile, you speak. You move, but something invisible resists, like walking through water, like wearing clothes that no longer belong to your body, like pretending you still believe in a God that already left the temple. This is not depression, this is not weakness, this is the beginning of consciousness. There is a moment, quiet and remarkable, where you realize, you can't go back. Not because the path is closed, but because you no longer fit inside the person you used to be. That is when the fear starts, because the old self is familiar. Even if it was false, even if it was painful, it was yours. And the unknown feels like death, but Hegel once whispered through time, consciousness is not born from harmony. It is born from rupture. You do not awaken in light, you awaken in the dark. Imagine a mirror, you've looked into it your whole life, believing it shows you who you are. But now, there is a fracture across the glass. It distorts your face. You wipe at it, but it remains. You panic, you blame the mirror. But the crack is not in the mirror, it is in you, and it had to appear. Because without the break, you would never question the image. Beneath every surface you polish, a fault line waits, not to destroy you, but to set you free. The first sign of real growth is not joy. It is disorientation, when everything feels uncertain. When the floor starts shifting, that is not a failure. That is the soul preparing to rise. There are no instructions for this part. No formulas, no shortcuts, just breath, just presence, just the unbearable clarity of being alive. The pain teaches you something school never taught, that truth doesn't come gently. That light enters through the wound, that every step forward may feel like falling, until you realize you're flying. And what feels like the end is often just the refusal to return to sleep. Conclusion of episode 1. What breaks you is often what begins you. The crack inside is not a flaw, it is the opening, to the self beneath the surface, to the consciousness waiting in silence, to the life you were meant to live, not the one you constructed to survive. Hegel did not believe in peace as the origin of truth. He believed in contradiction, not as error, but as necessity. In his world, progress is not a straight line, it is a spiral, a constant tension between what is and what refuses to remain so. We want life to be logical, clean, complete, but Hegel knew something deeper. Every truth, when lived fully, contains its own undoing. Every idea, when taken to the edge, collapses or transforms. This is not failure, this is the nature of becoming. To become conscious is not to find answers. It is to withstand conflict, not external, but internal. The child believes the world is whole, the adult begins to notice the cracks. But the awakened soul chooses to look directly at them. This is Hegel's fire, not comfort, not control, but confrontation. With the world, with the other, and above all, with the self, the dialectic begins. At first, there is thesis, a position, an identity, a way of seeing. You live it, you believe it, you build a life around it, then comes antithesis, the shattering. Something challenges your belief, not gently, violently, it denies what you assumed was stable. The mask no longer fits, the role suffocates, the mirror lies. Everything feels like collapse, but that collapse is sacred. Most people run at this point. Back to comfort, back to lies, back to whatever keeps the world small and understandable. But some, a rare few, stand still in the fire, and there, in the ashes, something begins, synthesis. Not a return, not a compromise, but a higher truth. A self that includes the crack, instead of hiding it. You are no longer who you were. You are not yet who you will be, but you are closer to truth than ever before. Growth is not addition, it is destruction first. You lose the false. You grieve what was never real, you walk through the desert of disillusion, and then, something emerges, not certainty, but awareness, not perfection, but presence. Imagine a tree. its seed falls into hard soil, a surface that resists, that refuses to open. But the tree does not wait for permission. It cracks the earth, it breaks what holds it down, and only by pushing against what resists does it rise. The opposition is not the enemy, it is the condition. The rock is not an obstacle, it is the sculptor. In Hagel's world, suffering is not accidental, it is the fudge of spirit. You cannot become whole without first being torn, because only what survives the tearing is truly yours. Every mask that melts in fire reveals the face beneath. Every identity that fails opens the door to essence. Every rupture writes the map of who you are becoming. This is the beauty of negation. It doesn't destroy you. It destroys who you thought you were, and so, the path continues. Not upward, but inward. With every illusion stripped, with every belief undone, you do not shrink. You expand, you become capable of holding opposites, pain and peace, strength and softness, darkness and light, not as enemies, but as twins. You begin to see the truth. There is no end to becoming, only deeper spirals. Nothing grows in perfect light, nothing transforms in comfort. Every beginning worth living is born from a fracture. Every real change costs something. Not just time, not effort, but identity, illusion, safety. Growth is not gentle. It is violent. It breaks before it builds. People talk about transformation like a sunrise, but it is more like a storm. The old self doesn't step aside. It fights for survival. It clings, it bargains, it screams, and pain is not the problem. Pain is the signal that the old shell is splitting, just like a snake shedding skin. Not because it wants to, but because it has to. If it doesn't, it dies. Pain is the tearing of that skin, not punishment, necessity. We are taught to avoid pain, to hide it, to numb it, to wear smiles like armor, but that armor rusts. And underneath it, the soul suffocates, because growth doesn't ask for masks. It demands truth, and truth often hurts. Think of the caterpillar. Everyone romanticizes the butterfly, but no one talks about the middle. Inside the cocoon, it dissolves. It becomes liquid. It unlearns what it was. No wings yet. No form. Only breakdown. That's what real change feels like losing your shape. Like becoming nothing so something new can be born. Pain is the teacher no one wants, but everyone remembers. It enters quietly, stays longer than welcome, speaks in a voice deeper than thought, and says the one thing no one else dares to say. This is not who you truly are. We resist pain because we think it destroys, but destruction is part of the design. The tree that never loses its leaves, never grows new ones. The wound that never opens, never heals. The ego that never breaks, never frees the soul. Pain strips away what is false. Not to hurt you, to reveal you. People think they want transformation, but they want it clean, safe, predictable. They want to change without changing, to grow without letting go. But pain says, you cannot hold on and rise at the same time. You cannot be born and stay in the womb. Pain marks the threshold. It is the space between no longer and not yet. It is the burning ground where the old self dies, and something silent begins to stir beneath the ashes. You may not see it at first. You may feel only emptiness, but that emptiness is holy. It is the soil of becoming. Think of a sculptor with a block of stone. She does not add, she removes, she chips away what doesn't belong. The shape was always there, it just needed to be revealed. That is what pain does. It carves, not to harm, but to uncover. You are not broken because you are in pain. You are breaking through the layers, through the masks, through the expectations, the conditioning, the noise, through everything that was never truly you, and what remains is real. Conclusion of episode 3. Pain is not in the way, pain is the way. Not an enemy, but an invitation, not a punishment, but a passage. The self that walks through pain is no longer afraid of what is inside, because what was once unbearable becomes the ground beneath your feet. A person who fears pain can be led anywhere, not with force, not with truth, but with comfort. That is the secret behind all manipulation. Offer relief from pain, and people will trade their freedom. The world teaches us that to hurt is to fail, that if we feel broken, something must be wrong. So we hide it, we distract ourselves, we run, and into that space steps control, quiet, smiling, helpful. It doesn't ask for much, only that you never feel too deeply, never speak too honestly, never look too closely, because real awareness would end the illusion. A soul that refuses to feel becomes easy to shape. People talk about power as if it is always loud, but the most dangerous kind is silent. The kind that tells you exactly what you want to hear. That says, you're fine, just stay comfortable. Don't question. Don't stir the waters. Don't open the door. That voice doesn't come from outside. It gets inside you, it wears your face, and calls itself peace. But it is not peace, it is sedation. Pain threatens the system, because it wakes you up. The moment you allow pain, real pain, you begin to see what has been hidden. The roles you play, the truths you avoid, the cage you've been sitting in with the door wide open. And those who benefit from your sleep, they fear that awakening. Think of someone wearing a mask for so long they forget the shape of their own face. Now imagine them looking in the mirror and the mask begins to crack. The pain of that moment feels unbearable, but that pain is sacred, because it asks the first time they see themselves again. Manipulation doesn't need chains. It needs compliance, and nothing creates compliance like fear of discomfort. This is why numbness is encouraged. This is why silence is rewarded. This is why people are praised not for their depth, but for their smoothness. Smooth people don't disturb systems, they don't disrupt narratives. They don't break patterns, they float and vanish, but the ones who feel, truly feel they are dangerous, not because they cause harm, but because they can no longer be fooled. Pain sharpens vision, and with clear sight, the game falls apart. You begin to notice the invisible strings, the subtle guilt, the emotional contracts, the quiet coercion woven into daily life. You see how often people call control love, how often they call dependence support, how often they call surrender normal. Pain teaches a different language, one that doesn't need approval, one that doesn't kneel to comfort, one that says, I'd rather hurt in truth than live in a lie. And in that decision you step out of reach. No one can manipulate a soul that welcomes its own darkness. But to get there, you must lose the addiction to being fine. You must let the cracks show. You must allow the breakdown, because that breakdown is your liberation. There is a power in being unafraid of your own shadows. When you no longer fear the ache in your chest, you become untouchable. They can shame you, they can offer you shortcuts, they can try to convince you to go back. But back leads to numbness, and numbness is the real prison. There is a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it doesn't demand. It just waits. It is the kind that lives in silence, in late nights, in empty rooms, in the space between one breath and the next. This is not the pain of injury. It is the pain of becoming. True transformation doesn't happen in crowds. It happens alone, always alone, because there are things inside you that no one else can touch. Wounds that are shaped like your voice, questions that only echo in your skull. And when the noise of the world fades, they begin to speak. That is when the right begins. People fear loneliness like death. They fill every corner with sound, with distraction, with motion, because silence feels like judgment, like failure, like proof that something is missing. But silence is not absence, it is the beginning of presence. In that stillness, the real voice emerges, not the one that pleases others, not the one that keeps the peace, but the voice beneath it all, raw, quiet, and yours. There is a moment on the path where no one can follow. Not because they don't care, not because they abandoned you, but because the next door opens only from the inside. It is a threshold, and the key is solitude. Imagine a dark room. No windows, no lights, only you, and what you carry inside. At first, you reach for anything, your phone, your thoughts, your memories. But they offer no relief. Eventually, you stop reaching, you sit, you breathe, and in that stillness, something ancient wakes up. A knowing, a flicker, a presence that was always there waiting. This is not loneliness as despair, this is loneliness as initiation. You are not being punished, you are being prepared, to see what only the broken see, to feel what only the honest feel, to stand without needing to be held. This is not cruelty, this is consecration. You begin to notice things. How much of your life was built on avoidance? How often you gave yourself away just to be seen? How much noise you allowed just to not hear your own truth? And now, there is only you, and that truth is loud. At first it feels unbearable, but then, strangely, it becomes beautiful. Because for the first time, you are not performing, you are not proving, you are not shrinking or stretching or folding yourself to fit. You are just here, real, whole. Even in the fracture, there is a kind of peace that only comes after the ache. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of no longer needing to pretend. And when you reach that place, you stop fearing alone, because alone becomes sacred. Alone becomes strength. You no longer chase connection out of emptiness. You meet others without needing them to complete you. You speak without waiting for permission. You love without losing yourself. This is what loneliness was trying to give you all along. It wasn't exile. It was return, not a curse, but a clearing, not isolation, but arrival, to the self beneath all selves. The truth doesn't arrive with trumpets, it shows up after the collapse. After the dust settles, after the world you built with trembling hands has already fallen. That is when something begins, not loudly, not instantly, but undeniably. Consciousness is not a reward, it is a result. It comes after. After the break, after the burn. After the silence, you don't wake up while everything still makes sense. You wake up when nothing fits anymore, when your old answers feel like sand in your mouth, when your reflection no longer recognizes you. That's when you start to see, not the world, not others, but yourself, beneath the noise, beneath the masks, beneath the roles. Collapse is not the end, it is the beginning of vision. Only what has been undone can reveal what was hidden. And consciousness, real, lived, unshakable consciousness is not knowledge. It is fire, it is what remains after the illusions are ash. There are no shortcuts to this kind of seeing. You can read it in books, you can inherit it, you can copy it from someone else's path. You in it, with pain, with loss, with everything you thought you couldn't survive. and did. That survival is your sight. You begin to see the systems you upheld, the ways you betrayed yourself to belong, the patterns you called personality, the fears you named love, the cages you locked yourself inside, and swallowed the key. And yet, you do not hate what you were, because now you understand. It was never about perfection. It was always about becoming. Imagine a house that burns down. At first, all you see is what is lost, the walls, the photos, the safe corners. But when the smoke clears, you notice something else, a foundation, still standing, stronger than you knew. This is consciousness, not the house, but the ground beneath it, the ground that never moved. The mind wants clarity. It wants conclusions, boxes, identities. But the soul wants presence, and presence cannot be borrowed. It can only rise from within. That rising, that subtle, powerful emergence comes only when you have nothing left to pretend with. You stop asking why, you stop needing explanations, because something in you knows now, not as fact, but as felt truth. You carry that truth like a scar, not ugly, but sacred, a reminder that you descended and returned. Changed, awake, there is a silence that comes with consciousness, a quiet strength. You no longer argue with life, you witness. You move, you choose, not from fear, but from alignment. You stop proving, you start being, and everything begins to shift, not because the world changed, but because you did. Strength is not built in comfort. It is carved in chaos. It is shaped in silence. It is born when there is nothing left, and you are still breathing. We imagine strength as control, as dominance, as the ability to stand tall while others fall. But real strength is softer, quieter. It lives inside those who've been broken, and chose to stand again. Pain doesn't just hurt. It humbles. It shows you what you can live without, what you no longer need, what you thought defined you, but didn't. Every time you fall and rise, something shifts. You lose a layer, a role, a lie, and what remains is dance, heavy with truth, unshakable. There is a power that comes from walking through fire, not around it, not over it, but through, a strength that doesn't seek to be seen, because it is not a show, it is a state of being. It says, I've known collapse, I've tasted surrender, and I am still here. That still here is more powerful than any performance of perfection. Most people spend their lives avoiding pain, building walls, chasing pleasure, disguising fear as ambition. But those who turn toward pain, those who choose to feel, to face, to endure, they become different. Not better, not above, just real. Pain is a sculptor. It doesn't ask for permission. It strips you bare, and in the stripping, you discover your shape, not the one others expected, not the one you rehearsed, but the one that was buried beneath all your defenses. That shape is strength, because it cannot be taken. It was not given to you, it was revealed by fire. Think of a mountain, not one that stands still, but one that was formed by pressure, by rupture, by time. It is not smooth, it is not soft, but it is sacred. You are that mountain. Every scar, every storm, every silence etched into your surface, not as wounds, but as proof. Proof that you didn't just survive. You became. Real strength is nothing to prove. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It listens. It waits. It holds, because it knows the most powerful presence is the one that doesn't need approval. Pain teaches you to stop running, to stop chasing a life that fits someone else's idea of success, to stop negotiating your worth for belonging. You learn to sit with discomfort, to breathe in storms, to stay rooted when everything around you shakes, and in that stillness you meet yourself. Not the self that pleases, not the self that performs, but the self that endures. That self is strength. People confuse strength with distance, with indifference, but the strongest souls are the most open, because they've been pierced, and chose not to close. They've seen darkness, and did not become it. They've touched grief, and kept the heart intact. That kind of strength glows. It draws people in, not with charm, but with depth. There is a kind of peace that doesn't come from answers. It doesn't come from success. It doesn't come from having everything in order. It comes from surrender, not the kind that gives up, the kind that lets go. You reach a point where fear still whispers, but you no longer obey. Where the future is uncertain, but you no longer chase control. Where the past still echoes, but you no longer turn back. This is not numbness. It is clarity. A calm that was never about the world. A stillness that wasn't granted to you, but built, breath by breath, in the middle of the storm. Peace is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to remain open inside it. To feel the ache, and not collapse. To feel the fear, and not retreat. To feel the doubt, and not abandon yourself. This is the kind of peace that can't be broken, because it is not tied to anything that can be taken. It lives inside, in the place pain once occupied. You no longer need everything to make sense. You don't rush to fix. You don't panic when things fall apart, because you've already fallen. And it didn't destroy you, it revealed you. That knowing, that steady, quiet knowing becomes your center. There is a difference between forced calm and earned peace. Forced calm is fragile. It is built on denial. It needs silence to stay intact. But earned peace, it walks into fire. It sits in grief. It stands at the edge and doesn't flinch, because it knows, whatever comes, you can hold it. Imagine standing on a cliff, wind in your face, the ground far below. The fear is still there, but your feet are steady, your eyes open. You do not close them, you do not run, you remain. That is peace. Not because you removed fear, but because you stopped letting it lead. This peace is not easy, it is not light, it is forged in silence, in solitude, in surrender. It asks you to stop fighting life, to stop demanding comfort, to stop controlling what was never yours to hold. And when you do, something shifts. You no longer need the world to give you peace, because you brought it with you. Now, you move differently, not to escape, not to prove, but to express. There is no more striving to become worthy, you are already enough. Not because someone told you, but because you felt it in the middle of your worst night. That moment stays with you, and becomes your gravity. The mind still chatters, the noise still rises, but beneath it all, silence, and that silence does not waver. You survived what you thought would break you, you stood inside your own collapse. You faced the silence, and in that silence you met the truth. Not the truth they gave you, not the truth written in books, but the truth that burned in your own bones. That truth had a shape, it was not light, it was not soft, it was shadow. The shadow is not the enemy, it is the doorway. Everything you ran from, the pain, the shame, the grief, the fear was never there to destroy you. It was there to show you what you are made of. You do not become whole by rejecting the dark. You become whole by turning toward it, by seeing it, by loving it. Because the part of you that hurts is still part of you. We were taught to hide the shadow, to wear light like a costume, to be polite, perfect, pleasant. But light without shadow is blindness. Real light is born in contrast. It glows not because it never knew the dark, but because it survived it. And now you carry that glow, not on your skin, but in your presence. You do not speak louder now. You speak deeper. You do not walk faster. You walk truer. You do not need to shine to be seen, because now you see yourself. The one who crawled through the fire, the one who kept breathing when it all fell apart, the one who dared to feel, and stayed open. That is your light. That is your rival. Hegel called it spirit. Not as something floating above us, but something forged within us. In the furnace of contradiction, in the agony of becoming, in the beauty of being torn open, and not closing back up. Now you move through life with a quiet power. You no longer explain. You no longer chase. You no longer beg for clarity from the outside. Because you carry the map now, etched in pain, written in healing, held in silence. You've become your own ground. There will still be shadows, there will still be storms, but you don't fear them anymore. You welcome them, because you know, every darkness holds a message. Every ending hides a seed, every shadow is a teacher in disguise. And you are no longer afraid to learn. You don't need to be saved. You don't need to be perfect. You don't even need to be certain. You just need to keep walking, with presence, with truth, with the light you earned in the shadow you faced.